Hey, Leah, how you doing?
Hey Reginald, I'm good. How are you?
All right, all right. I was just testing to see if you could hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah. We're already streaming. Okay. Hey Alexa, Seth. Hope you all are doing well. I think I'm going to be pulling double duty tonight. So excuse me looking away constantly to take notes and also facilitate the meeting. But Carl is sick and Brian is traveling, so he'll be here but not facilitating, I don't think. I think that's the current plan. Oh, hi, Bob. Let me see if I can promote. I don't think I'm allowed to.
Somebody needs to be promoted.
Yeah, looks like Mr. Chapman is
Okay.
here with about the SCAD proposal. Yeah.
Let's see if Benita. Hey, Benita, are you able to promote Mr. Chap?
Okay, let's see if Benita, hey, Benita, are you able to? Hi, Reginald, what were you asking?
I was asking if you were able to promote Mr. Chapman, and then he has give him authority to share his screen.
Okay, hold on, please. Thank you.
Hey, y'all. Thanks to you that have joined. Just a quick update. I think I'm going to be facilitating tonight. As Carl is ill and Brian is traveling, even though Brian might listen in. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes to let some folks join. We need more for quorum anyway. I know there are several people who are going to be out. I guess this is just a really busy time for folks. So
Reginald,
Yes.
um, I'm sorry, but I was just informed that I am unable to remote him in since I've already started the meeting.
Okay.
I just spoke with Juliet.
All right. So you can't. You're saying you can't promote him.
I cannot remote him in to the meeting
You
now
mean promote? You mean promote?
or add him. Am I trying to add him to the
No,
meeting?
he's already in the meeting. He's one of the attendees, but he needs to be a panelist.
Okay, thank you. I did not understand. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's okay.
We need one more person.
We,
Quorum, I believe.
we are administratively, we're doing a transition. I'm gonna introduce everybody to Benita, who works in our office, and she's going to be working with us as Chesney has gone on to the planning department. And I've not replaced Juliet either. And so I'm working on that though. So we have a little bit of transition.
Thank you.
You're losing all your stars.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
It is nice to still see Juliet's name in your email every now and then. That's probably
Yes.
automated.
Yes, indeed. And would you believe that she's helping me to replace her position? She's on the interview panel and helping me go through applications. And of course, she's helping us now. she's a rock star. That's all I can tell you. You know, and I guess that's the reason the mayor wanted her, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. I thank her.
Reginald, I do want to get us started, but we're one short of quorum.
Okay. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Good job. We can get started.
So what we can do, because I figure some people will be joining soon, y'all, I'll still do the call to order, and I'll do our roll call and just keep up with people on through the night, but we'll actually have to vote on the minutes after we get quorum. Mm-hmm. So just so you know, we'll do that at the end of the meeting. And as I said, I will be facilitating for us today. So I'm going to, at 6:36, officially call us to order and do our roll call. It's great to see all of you. So Valen?
Here.
Yeah. Ahmed is not going to be here with us tonight. Robert?
Here.
Okay. Rachel?
Here.
I am here. Rashaki?
Here.
Wonderful. Alexa?
Here.
Great. Sherrod will not be here. Amy?
Here.
Okay. Brian is not here yet. Seth?
Here.
Thanks. And then Carl and Ann won't be with us. All right. So, like I said, sorry for a little administratively and otherwise doing multiple things today. I also am facilitating my first meeting. As you guys all know, normally I am the secretary. So it took 2 people being out for me to have to do this today. But I'm so glad to be with all of you. As Reginald already mentioned, Chesney has transitioned away. So I'm going to be working with Benita and the staff to make sure that we get everything taken care of as far as logistics. They always do a wonderful job, so I'm not scared at all. And then one quick thing, just to follow up on the email I sent out to all of you, and we'll talk a little bit more about it at the end, but just so you all can have it front of mind, we will have a board retreat on May 6th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's going to be an in-person and a Zoom option, so if you can't physically make it down to the community development department, then we will have an option for you, and it will be recorded. That's already been requested by some folks. But please do email me, and you can do it during the meeting or afterwards if you're going to be here in person or virtually, so that we can have a running count for folks to make sure we get lunches and everything else put together for the in-person. But yeah, so our first agenda item is a presentation on the SCAD amendment by Mr. Bob Chapman. Thank you so much for being with us. And sorry about the promoting issue.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for your service to Durham and everything that you've been working on. And I know you're very interested in community growth and development and housing. Can you see my slide? Is that up on the screen?
No, not yet.
Should I wait for it to show up?
You should share your screen and then it should show up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now I need to know what button to push.
So on your computer, it would be the
Share screen. I see
screen.
it. There we go. That might do it.
And then on your, pick your presentation.
Yes. Have you see some pictures now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
It says, yes, in my backyard, YIMBY. will make
Yes.
house- Okay.
There is a movement nationally to deal with the implicit segregation between the haves and the have-nots in America that has been enforced through zoning for a long, long time. And a new law was passed and the president signed it. And there were some provisions in it called the Yes in My Backyard or YIMBY provisions. And this is a friend of mine drew this illustration of the things that are involved. The idea behind this legislation is to remove barriers for affordability. And that's something we've been working on for over a year. And when I say we, it's a task force of volunteers, and I've been one of them. These actions include donating land for affordable housing, allowing accessory dwelling units on single family lots, reducing lot size, streamlining the permitting process, creating transit-oriented developments, expanding.
Mr. Chapman,
Yes.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but we've had a request and I should have asked you to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. My name is Bob Chapman, and I live in Durham at 2525 Lanier Place, and I'm now in my 58th year in Durham. Most of my life has been here, and I've had a lot of wonderful experiences doing interesting projects. Many have been related to housing and development and affordability. I'm a new urbanist developer, and I've been involved in developing over 1,000 affordable units in Florida, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Durham, and in Arkansas and Missouri. I'm trying to power down and do less of this. I'm 76 years old, but when this came along, I said, I really want to be involved and help. So this is a cartoon about the YIMBY movement as opposed to the NIMBY movement, which is not in my backyard, which is something that every city in America, Durham is not alone. Everywhere I go, a lot of people are frightened that things will get worse rather than better. And what we're trying to propose is that walkability and compact mixed use development with missing middle is a much better solution. It increased density reduces land consumption and height limits cause sprawl. And we need transit and need to be inclusive and diverse and equitable and reduce off-street parking requirements and allow mixed-use development. So all I have to do is find them. There we go. I've been traveling the country and I see these signs everywhere and I take pictures of them. They basically have the same message, which is having more neighbors, densifying, adding ADUs, allowing smaller lot development actually is better. You'll have a more diverse group of neighbors. The first one was from Portland. This is Bellingham, Washington. And this is another one from Portland. Granny flats equal more cookies. Duplexes and triplexes are pretty. Home ownership is possible. And here's one from Raleigh. Y'all means all. Raleigh. One of the reasons it makes sense to have more compact development and less sprawl is that you can have location efficient development. And the Center for Neighborhood Technology, which monitors these things, gives Durham a 7% rating on the percent of location efficient neighborhoods, meaning you can live there and you can walk to school, you can walk to church, you can walk to work, you can walk to the store, or you don't have to drive a long distance to get there. And then they come up with these maps that show the annual tons of greenhouse gas created by every family. And the farther you have to travel to get to work and to get to the store, the more greenhouse gas you produce per household. And the average in Durham is now 6.3 tons. And the closer you get into the core of the city, the less greenhouse gas each family is producing. What we're dealing with in Durham, when I first came here in 1965 to go to school, our zoning code was 16 pages long. And the density, believe it or not, in one popular neighborhood, Trinity Park, was 70 families per acre. Nobody believes that, but you can go look at the code. It's there. And believe it or not, that's actually what got built. That's why there's an apartment building on nearly every block in Trinity Park. But after Dr. King was assassinated, the Congress passed the Fair Housing Act, and all over America, cities decided there's got to be a way we can't do explicit zoning based on race and religion. There's got to be another way. Let's make it based on family wealth and economics. So we downzoned. Trinity Park was downzoned from 70 to 8. So what we're talking about here is for the last year, our group of volunteers, and we have one paid employee, Dave Overson. We all shipped in enough to pay him. He's a master's degree in planning from UNC, to go through, and I go back to these. This is what we went from 16 pages to 2,392 pages of codes. And we had to pay somebody to read them all. I could never read all of them. And then going through and asking people, one of the people watching right now is a developer named Topher Thomas here in Durham. What kinds of zoning requirements are preventing you from building more affordable housing? And we made a list and came up with 8 major categories, and I'm going to walk you through them. I hope it doesn't bore you too much, but there are actually only 21 changes in these 8. People say there are 70 pages of changes, but when you change one word in the code, you might have to change it on 70 different pages because it reappears. Like we added to townhouses, we added the word townhomes that were separate, row houses. So the Affordable Path program is a way to incentivize affordable housing on small residential lots, on which is about 95% of our land. Currently, over 80% of affordable housing is relegated to 5% of residential land. So what we're trying to do is expand the amount of residential land that would be usable for affordable housing. We focused on geometries and buffers. We're proposing to eliminate buffers between identical or like uses. Right now, you have to have a buffer if the zoning district changes, but if the uses on both sides are the same, you have to have a 30 or 50 or 60-foot buffer, which really doesn't make any sense in terms of efficient and effective land use. We want to reduce any lot of a little less than half an acre, 20,000 square feet, from buffers. We want to make height regulations simpler and define it by the number of stories with maximums in feet. Right now, it's extremely complicated. And then we want to clean up the setback rules. For example, on a flag lot, an ADU doesn't have to be behind the primary flag unit, which is already behind the main lot. allows for multiple flags on the same primary lot, which is a better use of some of our very, very deep lots. And we have lots in Durham that are more than 200 feet deep. It adds sustainability requirements for small lots and reduced flagpole lots. If you want to do a small lot, you have to add something that is from a list of sustainability requirements, and things like rain barrels or spray foam insulation or solar panels. We increased the size of an ADU from 800 to 1,200 square feet. And this means that they can actually accommodate a small family. It could actually be a 2 or 3 bedroom house instead of a studio. Places of worship would be allowed to have accessory dwelling units, limited by the capacity of the water and sewer and other utilities, and the percent of coverage on site. And there are some restrictions on where those UTOs can be placed. ADUs can be placed. It allows for duplex ADUs, excuse me, I went, and as a sustainability requirement. Number 5 of the 8 is eliminates parking minimums. This has been the most controversial in all the public meetings that we've had. There've been a total of 75 meetings in the last year and about 6 in the last week, which I've been to. Raleigh eliminated all parking minimums. This is off-street parking. It will keep a parking maximum, and everybody seems to be very happy about it. It seems to have had a great effect in Raleigh, and we can simply go over and look and see, is this working for you all? It seems to be working in many, many places. In places where it doesn't work, there's a solution, which is to give parking stickers and put up signs saying you can't park here unless you have a residential parking permit, and it could be restricted by hours. In neighborhood commercial zones, we can use the CI code. Right now, only one place in Durham is eligible to use the CI code, which is the walkable commercial over on the corner of Kent and Chapel Hill and University, which was financed by Self-Help. It's where the food co-op is. If you like that, this allows you to have exactly that same kind of development in more than just that one place in Durham. The next thing is small commercial projects using the CI code can be exempt from site plan review. Right now, only single and 2-family projects are exempt regardless of size. That's a huge subsidy to build a single family home based on time and cost of site plan review. If you have a choice, the commercial project going through the site plan process may encourage you just simply not to do it. There have been almost no small commercial buildings built in Durham since the late 1940s. We could only find 4. Small townhouse projects with 10 or fewer units on small parcels would be exempt from site plan review. Right now, only single and 2-family projects are exempt regardless of size, and this is a huge subsidy to single-family homes based on time and cost of site plan review. And we introduced a new housing type, detached row houses, to give more options and variety to the housing stock. And then the last is we focused on nonconformities and allowing, if you have a house that's nonconforming, now you can't do anything with it. You can't fix it up, add anything to it. And as long as you don't increase the size of the nonconformity, you would be allowed. And then a few miscellaneous things. West Durham is the only neighborhood in Durham now that has a floor area ratio calculation. This removes ADUs and garages from that calculation. Otherwise, they are discouraged. And when you discourage them, they don't happen. And we want to make it consistent with the rest of the code. Cluster subdivisions will be allowed on sites of 2 or more acres. More cluster subdivisions are better for the environment than the suburban alternative. The project I did for Duke University a few years ago called Trinity Heights was technically a cluster subdivision, and we'd like to see more people be able to do that. Downspouts would be allowed to be piped to the right of way again. A previous effort that I was also involved in was called EHC, Expanding Housing Choices. And people objected and said there's going to be too much impervious and that will cause flooding. We should require all of the water to be retained on the site and absorbed on the properties. And what that has led to is a lot of flooding properties, water flowing off one lot onto their neighbor's lot. And a very simple solution would be to simply go back to what was in effect for years, tens and dozens of years, which was piping the runoff from the gutters to the curb. It worked great. With the very low permeability and absorption and percolation of our soils, it's almost impossible to expect it to be percolated or absorbed on site. So that was a bad idea to do it, and we just want to fix that back to the way it used to be. Planned development residential changes allow for more mixed use and more discretion to the applicant, as this will be necessary to go through rezoning for review. And that's a suggestion that came from the Planning Commission. There'll be slight increases allowed to encroachments for HVAC, porches, bay windows, and other desirable features. And buildings built before 1950 can be moved and used as ADUs or moved on small lots. So here's the problem. Entry-level housing doesn't exist. It's not being built. Small businesses can't own their buildings. Citizens can't invest in their city. And simple projects require expensive, time-consuming, risky processes to go through. For example, these are all small businesses that are in rental properties. If any one of those wanted to build a new building, here's an example over on Andrew Avenue. If you wanted to replace that building on the corner with something the same exact size, you'd have to buy all the rest of the houses on the block and tear them down in order to provide the required parking. On top of that, you'd have to build a retention pond, which would use all the rest of the property on the block. And so here's the houses that would be lost if you wanted to do that. The next is the neighborhood center. Zoning currently prevents mixed use in walkable neighborhoods in Durham. Places like this in Blowing Rock or this Hillsborough, North Carolina. Here's an example. If you wanted to build a coffee shop in Durham, you could almost immediately get approval for the one on the top. And this is how 30 people could order coffee. And only the one on top has green space and electric vehicles to save the environment. The one on bottom, I think it's from Paris, would be very difficult to permit in Durham. Nearly all of Durham's walkable neighborhood commercial buildings were built over 75 years ago, when our population was 1/5 of what it is now. Under the current UDO, only 4 small commercial buildings have been built in the past 15 years. And let's see if the UDO already has this commercial infill district, which is the one I was mentioning over on the corner of University and Duke University Road and Kent Street and Chapel Hill Street. In addition to eliminating parking, SCAD enables other commercial districts to use the CI setbacks and heights as long as the lot is under 20,000 square feet, which is a little less than a half an acre. And here's what you could end up with that kind of change. These kinds of places. The code limits the ability to build affordable housing. For example, 2 lots side by side. Currently, a builder could build 2 affordable single family houses on these lots. Meanwhile, you could build 6 units under the UDO using the EHC changes, but 4 of them would have to be rentals. And what we're proposing to do is allow the sale of those additional rentals, which allows people to experience capital formation and wealth building for their families through equity of home ownership. And the Affordable Path Program, which is an incentive program for builders to do this kind of thing, is explained in the SCAD proposal. So here's what's changing. They're parking fixes. We enable neighborhood commercial. We have an affordable path program. We simplify the codes on heights and mixed use requirements and buffers and setbacks and uses, and technical issues such as church clarifications for ADUs. And here's some examples of unbuildable lots in Walltown in the current coding because of the street yards on 2 sides when you have a side street. And here is, we would allow you to build the ADU first and fill in the larger home later as your family grows. And there are 1,500 acres of land in Durham owned by places of worship. If only 4 units added to each acre, that would be 6,000 new homes, about 1/3 of our affordable shortfall. Here's a chart that shows the confusion of the current height requirements. All 3 of these are the same height according to our code. And here's an example of why people are tearing houses down, because of the 25-foot setback requirement, the rest of the lot is not big enough for multiple units. And to make it a viable small lot, we would reduce that setback requirement to 15 feet. This is another example of how buffers are making it virtually impossible to use some lots in Durham. So what we're talking about is making it possible rather than impossible. And why has there never been a mixed use subdivision, and why my neighborhood can't legally have a coffee shop? Well, PDR requires you to have 100 units in your new project before you can have any commercial. And once you add the parking requirements, it reduces the number of residential units that you can build, which is a disincentive for suburban sprawl developers to build more residential. And PDR, I've been through 2 PDRs myself in Durham, and in both cases, they cost over $150,000 to go through the process, which basically shuts out small scale incremental developers in Durham. Here's an example. This is a wonderful restaurant that used to be over Mangum Street, Salt Box, gotten a lot of fame. If it was built from scratch about that size, today you'd have to build a retention pond that size next to it, which would eliminate their small parking lot. And these cities in North Carolina have already exempted from stormwater requirements. Charlotte, suburbs of Matthews, Mint Hill, Cornelius, Davidson, and Pineville, Wilmington, Asheville, and Winston-Salem have also exempted small-scale commercial from these stormwater pond requirements. And that's it. I went really fast. I tried to save time. I maybe went too fast, but please ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. We appreciate it. Amy and Robert, I see your hand. So we do have one question from our attendees really quickly. And Rita, I'm just going to read it just to make it a little bit easier, but feel free to type again in the Q&A section if you have follow-ups. She asked, can trees be used for buffers rather than bricks and other things used to make buffers? So legally right now in Durham, I'm assuming, can trees be used as part of the buffer requirement?
Yes, they can. And it's done on the percentage. There are charts, and I don't believe we've done anything with those buffer charts in terms of how many trees, what kind of species they are, how wide the planting area is. But you can, for example, if you wanted to build a project next to the interstate, you could build a brick wall for sound purposes, or you can have a vegetated screen. And depending on the width and the number of trees, that would be acceptable as well. And that isn't being changed.
Okay, thank you. And then Amy and then Robert.
Hi there, and I apologize. I'm going to ask this question, listen to the answer, and then I need to get off because with the late start time, I actually have another commitment. But thank you very much, Mr. Chapman. So I live in Lakewood. Actually, I live on Bivens. My closest cross street is Echo. And so you're probably not surprised, but all the rage in Lakewood right now is with about ADUs. And there's even something being built like kind of right behind me where they're putting, they took one lot and divided it into two, and they're putting 2 homes in the front and 2 ADUs in the back. So building 4 structures on what used to be zoned as one lot. And I completely agree that this neighborhood is not dense enough for its proximity to downtown. But I also just like fear that we're only getting 2 families in these 2 lots where, it's like we talk about, the ADUs. And so now we can actually house 4 families here, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. But my guess is that that's not what's going to happen. And so, yeah, I think there's like an incentive for people to put in ADUs for various reasons, but I don't know that it is always contributing to any kind of affordable housing stock locally. And so I just would love to hear your reflection.
I have to tell you that's true. There is such an overwhelming shortage of housing in Durham. It is hard to keep it from being priced at market. And the market for, even if you wanted to rent a studio apartment in downtown Durham, there are places that would ask you to pay $2,000 a month now.
So what I'm saying is like these 2 units in the front that are meant to be the single family homes, I'm guessing it is not a separate family in the back. It's just the family's going to use it for a workspace or an art studio or some use that's not even providing housing to a second household.
I think it's flexible, and I think that over time, one of those may be occupied by a granny and become a granny flat, and the other may be rented out. And under the SCAD, we actually would encourage people to consider selling the units to the occupants. But if it has a bathroom and a kitchen, it would be and it would be considered a unit if it actually has a stove and a separate electric meter. It's all set to go, and if somebody wants to use it for a different purpose now, take the long view. At some point, people.
Right. I mean, these are 2-story, the ADUs are 2-story structures with their own full-blown kitchens, full-blown bathrooms. Like those are the only things that have been built so far. They haven't even built the houses that are going to be in front of them. But I'm just like, even if it's a granny house, that granny's moving down from New Jersey, she wasn't even here previously. And so I love the idea of ADUs. We have a lot of people in our neighborhood who are, including architects and, developers who are evangelists for ADUs. But I just fear that people are going to be putting ADUs in their backyards and using them as an artist studio, and it's not going to provide housing to anybody. And so that's my, I completely agree. We need to make this neighborhood and Forest Hills and others that are within close proximity to downtown, we need to make them more dense. But I struggle to see where ADUs are going to be.
That's a very good point. And there is a requirement for affordability if they use the PATH program to build on smaller lots that would require waivers of the minimum lot size, and that's in this program. And we're asking the city council to decide how long they want the affordability requirement to be maintained. It could be anywhere from 1 year to 20 years or 30 years. And there's arguments pro and con. The longer you make it, the less people will commit to it. And if you allow people to buy into an affordable unit and take away from them the right to sell it and gain from the appreciation, they haven't been able to ride the same train that a lot of other people have been able to ride, which is most of my friends, the first time they made any substantial money and had it in their pocket was when they sold their first house. And it's sort of a shame to say to certain people, well, you just can't do that. So there are pluses and minuses to the restrictions. The other thing is you don't want to see the stock of affordable houses go down, and it's a tough choice. That's a great question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. And Robert.
Well, Mr. Chapman, I think this is a great presentation. This is just what I've been waiting to hear, a little more detail about what's happening with affordable housing in Durham and what's being really being done for the citizens. I had a couple of questions I wanted to ask about the code. I've noticed at the corners of Dayton Street, they put some houses there. Fayetteville and Cornwallis, there's some houses there, and on Dearborn Streets. It appears that those properties are close to creeks. I would say possibly in floodplain areas. Has there been any change to the coding, the floodplain map, to allow developers to build properties close to creeks?
The floodplain, there's a whole department in Durham, stormwater management, and we haven't done anything to affect any of that other than one suggestion, which is that small businesses be exempted from having to have on-site stormwater retention ponds. And that was the salt box example based on the codes that are in Charlotte and Fayetteville and Greensboro and Winston-Salem. And each of the drainage basins, the Neuse River and the New Hope and Cape Fear drainage basins have different requirements, and there is an overriding set of restrictions under the what's called the flood zone requirements under FEMA.
Right.
And FEMA firm flood information flood insurance resource map, I think it stands for.
Right.
And you can't buy insurance for your house unless you pay national flood program insurance, which is 3, 4, 5 times as much. And so pretty much people can't build in the floodplain because they can't get financing, because they can't get insurance. But the other reasons are, if you're in the Neuse Basin, the drainage area flows into the water supply for Raleigh, and Durham has been loading up the reservoirs with nitrogen and phosphorus. It used to be primarily from detergents and fertilizers. And so I was talking to a person in stormwater management, and he said, a virgin forest in that zone would not pass stormwater requirements. So everybody on the north side of Durham has to have what have been called best management practices,
Right.
Which are storm ponds, filters, all kinds of different methods of reducing the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus in Falls Lake.
I asked the question because I'm familiar with with Central Durham, Eastern Durham, and the challenges that part of town has with flooding. And I didn't know if through this process, I see the houses built, and I know where the creeks are, and it appears the one on Fayetteville Street is sitting right back in the creek. And I didn't know if there was some,
We're not dealing with that. The existing regulations will stay in place. And again, the only one was the retention pond for small scale commercial.
okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate what you presented to us today.
I've enjoyed it. I'll answer any other questions anyone has.
Thanks, Robert. One more from Rita McDaniel, who's listening in. She asked, what about folks with mobility issues? How would they benefit from ADUs on smaller lots? People who use devices to get around, I assume like wheelchairs and things like that, may require a little more space in order to navigate among buildings. Is there anything you can say about that? Kind of, I guess what it sounds like is maybe ADA compliance in residential areas, which I'm not sure if that is impacted or not.
There are different codes. The International Fire Code really supersedes everything. And it requires separation between buildings based on hours of fire resistance. Typically in Durham, that turns out to be about a 6-foot separation. And if you have overhangs, it can be further. It may be a 5-foot separation. And then the question is, can fire apparatus reach a fire? And this is not addressed in our code, but one of the problems is that the new International Fire Code requires that all streets, which they don't even call streets, they call them fire equipment access roads, be minimum 20 feet clear for fire equipment so that they can stop the fire truck and put out their outriggers. The problem with that is if you add parking on both sides, the street becomes 34 feet wide, and a 34-foot wide street is possibly 10 or 20 times more dangerous than a 24-foot wide street, particularly if you had parking on both sides, which does exist in Durham. There are 20, because in that you have to take your turn. People have to go very slow, and it's a lot safer for children. That's the whole point. So in terms of the fire equipment access rule, you have to be able to get the fire truck to within 200 feet of the furthest point. And then the assumption is that the firefighters will be able to carry the hose that last 200 feet. And the building department would have to have a sign off from the fire marshal. We made some changes about permitted encroachments for things like bay windows, or sometimes they're called oriels, and porches for sure. If a porch would be able to encroach into a front yard setback, for example. But the fire marshal, who is in the planning department, but is a full-time firefighter, would have to sign off on the plans that this would comply with the fire code. I'm sorry about the long answer.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Ms. McDaniel, I hope that answered your question. Rachel.
Thanks, Bob. This was really helpful to hear. No real question, just I want to applaud the abolishing the parking minimums. I'm a fellow affordable developer, and I think a lot of folks don't realize that when you're trying to build affordable housing in any form, parking oftentimes can kill these projects. And to kind of put it into perspective too, some of these parking spaces can cost upwards of 22 grand to build and install, and folks cannot live in a parking space. And so I think Durham would be doing the right thing by kind of following some of these more progressive cities on the West Coast that have abolished the parking minimums. Raleigh, I think, is on the right track as well. So I think it's the right next step. I'm also a resident of Trinity Park, and we recently also built an ADU above a garage. that we will be renting. And so I know Amy was concerned about how the ADUs will be used. And I think we need to give folks an opportunity to move in and occupy these spaces and occupy these units, because otherwise the alternative is just to have the single unit on the current parcel. And so in my opinion, the way that Durham is growing right now, we can't build quickly enough. And I'd like to believe that our residents are creative and will fill these, new units with folks that need the housing and are arriving in our city and don't have anywhere to go. And for folks that are already here, who are getting further pushed out as well, to find something affordable. So I think it's good stuff. I really appreciate you
Thank you very
laying
much.
this out. So yeah, I wish you and the rest of the advocates the best of luck with it.
Well, thank you so much. Let me comment. Back, oh gosh, it was around the year 2000, a long time, 23 years ago. Duke asked me to look at the acre and a half of vacant property that they owned behind East Campus between Sedgefield and Berkeley and Clarendon. We had a huge struggle to build a neighborhood back there that was like the existing neighborhood, because the downzoning had reduced the density and increased the setbacks and increased the yard sizes. We couldn't build the alleys. We ended up having to do 12 text amendments and be declared to be a suburban cluster subdivision to be able to do that. But one of the great things that happened was we offered, because we put the alleys in, we were able to offer ADUs, and people who purchased the accessory dwelling unit from us, and we sold 30 of them, and I bet in Durham before that there were maybe 3 or 4. I found two or three old ones over in Trinity Park, as a matter of fact. But suddenly there were a lot more and a lot more experience with them. Most of those rented to graduate students at Duke. The rent at that time was $700 a month, and the mortgage payment on the entire house, which was typically a 1,700 square foot to 2,100 square foot house in front, the mortgage payment on the whole thing was about $1,300 a month, as low as $1,100 a month. And so more than half of the cost of living there, and sometimes 80% of the cost of living there, was paid for by the rent from the ADU. So the ADU made the entire household experience very affordable housing. Most of those houses were restricted to Duke employees, and Duke, one of the things that enabled us to do all that is that they sold us the land at a very low price, and we passed that on to the owners. But back to the question of those 30 units, I know that 28 of them went to renters. I haven't checked lately, but at least initially, only 2 were retained for like personal offices or artist studios.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Are there any other questions? All right.
Well, you're
Mr.
the nicest people I've met with all week.
Thank you. We super appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much. This is great. Keep up your good work.
Absolutely. And Mr. Chapman, one quick request from me. Would you be able to send the slides? Reginald, I assume that he's been communicating with you?
It is a PowerPoint, and I can turn it into a PDF, but there are a couple of animations that will go away, but I can send you a PDF of it by email.
That would be wonderful.
Be happy to.
Yeah, you can put it on the email that that gave you the invitation. If you can just respond to that email with your presentation, we can get it to the committee.
Thank you, sir. I'll do that, and I'll have it out by either later tonight or sometime tomorrow. And Reginald, I've been working with you in various things in Durham over the years, and good to see you again.
Likewise, very much so.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chapman. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening. I'm going to say goodbye.
Okay, no problem. All right. Hello again, everyone. Really quickly, I think we'll just need to table our March meeting minutes until next meeting, which is fine. I put that in our minutes so that I don't forget. But I know that Reginald, you were going to give us a community development update, but before that, if anyone had any more kind of discussion that they wanted to have about the SCAD proposal.
I'm gonna have to drop in about 6 minutes.
Okay, no problem. We know that the like later time.
Right.
Yeah, no problem at all. So Reginald, Rachel, do you have anything?
You know, what I propose is that we just table my comments until the next meeting because the information that was shared was very dense and I don't want to contribute to anybody's brain
Brain fatigue.
brain fatigue.
No.
I
Been a
definitely
long day.
all that.
Yeah.
It has been a Monday. Like that is
Yeah.
True.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay. So,
Yeah, I had a quick point, and this might
Sure.
also just be me having not attended. I know Bob and his group of advocates have been meeting with other groups, and I was curious if we could quickly just discuss at a high level what some of the feedback has been from some of these other groups, what some of the concerns have been about what the proposal perhaps is missing or what gaps there are. I don't know if Mr. Johnson, if you have been in attendance at some of these meetings too, but I think knowing that they're going in front of council on the 1st, I'm curious what other feedback they're hearing right now, and how planning, I guess, is recommending that they address it.
Well, I would first share that they're not going before the council on the 1st. That public hearing has been postponed. And my understanding is that the council is going to take most of the summer, actually. It probably won't come back until after the summer recess.
Okay,
So that's-
to further review it and get
Yes,
a better understanding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's number one. So we knew that when we scheduled, this happened in between the time the idea came to the executive committee and we actually did the scheduling. That's when the council did move the public hearing, but we decided to go head on with having Bob to come. So that gives us some time to have some further discussion as well as have others to come, as this evolves. And I don't have anything, I have not attended the meetings just yet. I'm actually going to be meeting during the month of May with the planning department and my team, and I'll have something to share probably a little bit later.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fantastic if you could help kind of relay what sort of discussions they're having within their department and their team. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, Seth, I read that article too. Yeah, there's been a lot in the news about it, so I appreciate actually being able to hear in detail what it's about and not like being able to skim, and then yeah. But thank you, Seth, for putting those articles if folks are interested in reading them. Are there other questions or comments? If not, we can move to board discussion and other business. All good? Wonderful. We are a small group tonight, so just another, please email me if you're coming to the retreat or not, because I do just want to make sure that Reginald and his team have enough time to make sure that everything gets set up, and Reginald will be our guide, our presenter through the retreat. So we're hoping it'll be a good time and an informative time to really invest in our group and make sure that newer members have the chance to get a lot of really good background information about our work.
And I want to make sure we have enough food. So
Yes, we want to make sure that no one, no one goes away hungry. Thanks, Alexa. All right, want to make sure there's no, how is this person? Oh. I'm not sure what exactly is going on with the Q&A, but let me read it really quickly. Are there any other questions from the public? I don't see any currently, but if you currently have one, please put it in the chat and we will answer it before we adjourn.
Leah, I see Donna Frederick has her hand raised.
Oh,
She's
okay.
an attendee.
Benita, would you be able to promote her so she can ask her question?
And then I see another question from an anonymous attendee. I'm not sure if they were trying to find the question box
The
or if
Q&A
they,
box.
Is that Donna Frederick?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Donna, you can talk.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my question, he's already gone. I tried to, when you were talking about the parking, and one of the questions was, what's the calculation between handicap parking and parking if you take them all away? There's people who need parking. You know, it's not an option. There's handicap, there's senior citizens. So what happens to that equation? Because there's a certain amount of handicap spaces that go with regular parking spaces. That was the question I was going to ask. But
I can provide some insight just kind of based on my experience, and just because parking minimums are abolished doesn't mean that a project or an affordable community would not provide spaces, because at that point it becomes almost like a marketability issue, right? And oftentimes with any sort of affordable housing, thinking more like multifamily, not necessarily ADUs in this case, but the population and the residents that you're looking to serve are going to oftentimes have needs associated with accessible parking and other design implications. So even though parking minimums are abolished, it doesn't mean that certain development would do away with all parking spaces entirely. I know in our experience, what has happened is we've provided too much parking to the point that an entire a second building of apartments could perhaps be built in that space, to the point where perhaps the required parking is only being utilized by about 30%. So that's ultimately what the hurdle is it going to be a sea of concrete and asphalt for spaces that are not being used by those folks that are living there? I'm sure there are some folks that would be interested in building, say, like a more centrally located walkable opportunity for folks that would walk or use public transportation to get, say, downtown. But oftentimes if folks are even living in like the first or second tier neighborhoods, they'll have a car. Most folks will own a vehicle. So that was kind of the point that I was making in that, but I appreciate you bringing it up because it's a very valid point.
I just, you know, I know we're trying to go with the trend of zero vehicles in building Durham, but our infrastructure for public transportation is not there yet. It's not there, and the infrastructure of the streets are not there yet. So it almost seems like we're projecting something that will come. There's no lack of housing for people who are coming. The lack of housing are the people who live here who cannot afford, when that affordability number is really, really not affordable. That's what the whole issue is. And so I think throwing that word out and saying we're going to compromise by building affordable and this will solve the housing issue here, that's not the real problem. More housing does not mean cheaper housing. It's been proven it's not true. And I think the longer that we keep swallowing that scenario, the longer it's going to take to come to the table and find some real solutions in Durham for people to live and afford to live here. That's the most people who are living, like you said, in areas downtown. Most of the people who live in here are not working downtown. They're working out of town. And so there's a lot more data to be configured in this proposal. And I think it hasn't been. Look, I've attended some of those meetings with other groups, and the public is furious because they haven't been presented with all the facts and they haven't been presented at large. They don't understand exactly what's going on. And it's not fair for a city to have such a small group to present that they're not aware of. And I think that's the common feeling of most of the residents in Durham. I stop and ask them, like, well, I heard about it, but I'm not sure. That's no way to treat the citizens of Durham. And that's just my take for today. Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing, Donna. I think our group here, the CAC, we don't have any decision-making authority with this. I think ultimately, and it's encouraging, I think with Mr. Johnson sharing that ultimately council has decided to take their time, both to give folks, residents a chance to reach out and have more of these meetings, as well as for those council members to dig into the language and the proposal themselves. So, but I do appreciate you being here with us tonight and listening in and sharing your perspective on this.
Yeah. Reginald, do you have anything else to add, or?
No, I do not. This has been a great presentation and great preliminary feedback. We can see, by our attendance and guests that this is a popular topic, and so we're not done.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like we're done. The city is definitely not done. I think there's a lot more discussion to be had. And like Rashaki, your question about discussion around amending the parking requirement. Like, I think that's a super valid point to bring up to the folks who developed the amendment. And, as it goes through kind of the public process to be presented to council and very potentially, big P potentially, get adopted in all or in part. So I think there's a lot there. And I know that next meeting, Reginald will go into some details about how that amendment may affect the community development department and, city functions as a whole and what's actually feasible and possible. Because I know there are concerns, obviously, from the municipal side about that. Great. Are there any other questions? Okay. No announcements, I don't think, except unless someone here has one. I don't think we have one. Again, other than please email me about the retreat. This is the third time I've said it.
I do have one.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yes. So on Monday night, there will be a public hearing on the annual action plan. And so I just want to share that with you all. If we haven't emailed it, we'll email it out to you. Of course, it's been advertised and been on public review. And so just wanted to share that.
Wonderful. And Reginald, if you send that once you send it, I'll also attach it to the minutes.
Okay, okay, will do.
Wonderful. Well, then, if we feel good, then I will request a motion to adjourn.
A motion.
A second.
Thank you all. Wonderful to see you. I hope that I get to see the majority of you on the 6th. If not, I will see you at our May meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Take care,
Thank you.
everybody.
Have a good evening.